Swear it's not coronavirus. I'm just waiting here for a couple of people to drop into the stream. We got one already. Hello, hello. Good night. Good evening. I hope you're doing well this evening. Why don't we just jump right in? I'm hoping a few more people will join us in a couple of minutes. But welcome to the Daily Faded. I'm Hetz. And there is one more Justice Democrat in the House starting in January. And I switched from the Purple Punch back to the Pineapple Express tonight because I was just more feeling the Pineapple Express. So yeah, I just want to say hey, and I hope you're doing well. I hope you're feeling healthy. I hope you're practicing your social distancing and all that good stuff. The world is getting weirder by the day, so there's a ton of stuff to talk about. I actually, in my notes, I wrote enough for the entire show by around 10 o'clock this morning. But then all day long, as news breaks, I want to include it. And I end up having just way too much stuff to talk about. And I didn't want to start off talking about the election results last night because they were terrible. And the election happening yesterday was a terrible thing. But there is good news, which is in Illinois' 3rd Congressional District. Marie Newman beat Dan Lipinski in the Democratic primary. Yay, Marie Newman! She is a Justice Democrat. She accepts no corporate PAC money. She is pro-Medicare for all and Green New Deal and legalizing marijuana. And she, for that, and I'm not getting much out of this, Tony. I don't know what's going on. And the Democrat who she beat, Dan Lipinski, is an anti-choice, anti-LGBTQIA plus Democrat who votes with Donald Trump, I don't know, 65% of the time, something like that. And of course, he is who Nancy Pelosi and Sherry Bustos at the DCCC, they were backing Dan Lipinski because they always back the incumbent, especially when that incumbent is a corporate tool. And Dan Lipinski was a corporate tool, is a corporate tool, and will be until he is out at the end of the year. So that's good news. At least there's some good news from the election yesterday. And now on to coronavirus. Don't worry, we're not only going to talk about coronavirus tonight, but did you hear that they are stocking up on sausage and cheese in Germany? It is a Wurstkäse scenario. My wife read that to me off Facebook this morning, and I thought it was hilarious. I don't know why. Wurstkäse scenario. All right, so the updates. Worldwide, we have now surpassed 219,000 cases, and we have surpassed 8,900 dead. In the United States, we have gone past 8,827 cases, and we have at least 137 dead from the coronavirus. Europe has 86,000 cases, over 4,100 deaths, and Europe is now the epicenter. There have been more cases in Europe than in China. However, something to give us all a little bit of hope. What the fuck is going on with this weed? Sorry. No new cases in China today. So that's a major milestone and something to give us a little bit of hope. Given that the first case was in December and now they've had no new cases today, doesn't mean that it won't re-blossom. It doesn't mean that it won't break out again in China. It very well may. LA County update. As of today, there are 46 new cases, which makes a total of 190 cases in LA County. 96 of those cases are new in the last 48 hours. But LA County has also started testing 3 drive-through specimen collection locations where people can go and get tested, which was very successful in South Korea and in China. So that's good. It's nice to see our local authorities being more on top of the situation than Donald fucking Trump. Okay, I got some that time. Columbia epidemiologist Jeffrey Shaman just published a new paper in the journal Science. He says, quote, if we have 3,500 confirmed cases in the US, you might be looking at 35,000 in reality. They're basing that on modeling the outbreak in China, and they have determined that the rate is probably a factor of 10, which is why we all need to stay at home. There is a lot of stealth transmission with this disease because there are a lot of people who are asymptomatic or who only have very mild symptoms. We are 6 to 8 weeks behind where we should be to know how bad this thing is going to be and whether or not we're going to be overwhelmed in our hospitals. He pointed out that self-quarantine is good, but it has enormous economic, psychological, and emotional consequences, which is clearly true. I reported to you last night that LA had seen a couple of ICE raids yesterday. ICE suspended raids today, except those deemed mission critical. So I want to thank you, the Daily Faded community, because clearly it was our mutual outrage that pushed ICE to change their ways. We changed the ways of the American SS. So way to go, Daily Faded community. I also wanted to touch base on something I said last night, which is I was talking about how this crisis will radicalize people and could very well lead to some of the socialist policies that many of us on the left are fighting for. But literally right after I turned off the stream, something else occurred to me, which is, on the other hand, people may not have the choice to turn towards socialism to solve the problems that are created during this crisis if they are under the yoke of fascism. And we, my brothers and sisters and non-binary siblings, are under the yoke of fascism. I'm not saying that the coronavirus lockdown is fascist. I'm saying we are already living in a fascist state. Sorry to be less than cheerful. Should enjoy our fascism. We are the most incarcerated country in the world. That would be one indicator of a fascist state, having a lot of people in prison. We are a fascist state by Mussolini's definition of fascism, which was that fascism was when the interests of the state and the corporations merged, which is how this country has been run for several decades. They have corporate capture, as we discussed last night, of all the major agencies of government. And thanks to campaign contributions and lobbyists and blah, 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 we have voter suppression. We have voter fraud, possibly. The exit polls are off by 15% in many of the early states. I might be getting into this tomorrow. With the United Nations, the standard is 4%. If there's a deviation of 4% between the exit polling and the result of the election, then that is considered a sign of fraud and something that needs to be investigated by the UN. And we are off by 15% in many of the early states. So that would also, fraudulent elections would also be something you would find in a fascist society. We have a compliant mainstream media, state media, that pushes the two-party narrative, despite always agreeing with both parties about tax cuts and endless wars and surveilling the population. Oh, that's right, we also have surveillance of everything we do, everything we say, every email, every text. We have cops who kill innocent people without any consequences. There's oppression of every minority community in the country. We have ICE terrorizing an important minority in our country. And we are now willingly handing over much of our freedom to that same system. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that we shouldn't follow the CDC guidelines. And the CDC is not a fascist organization, but we are surrendering some of our rights. So that leaves the question: will we get our rights back? Will we get our right to public assembly back? I believe we will. By the way, I do think we will. But if Trump wanted to go one way, he could really try and become a much bigger autocrat than he already is. But there's another possibility on the horizon that was much discussed today on Twitter, which is the Republicans seem to be moving to the left of the Democrats on coronavirus relief. Trump signed Pelosi's bill into law today, which guaranteed unemployment insurance for 20% of the American labor force, while the Republicans spent the day talking about cash payments direct to citizens. Now, I'll believe it when I see it, but Trump also put a stop to foreclosures and evictions. That's a very left-wing solution. That's something that Bernie Sanders was calling for. Trump also invoked the Defense Production Act today. That's nationalizing industry in essence, to deal with defense, to deal with a war, to deal with a crisis. That is very much a left-wing idea. It's also an autocratic idea, but it's a left-wing idea. And when someone in the Democratic caucus meeting brought up the idea of direct cash payments to people, Nancy Pelosi said, "No fucking way." She shot it down immediately. And so that is the Republicans going to the left of the Democrats. Now we'll see. The devil's in the details. They're saying it's going to be means tested, which I don't think is a good idea, because someone always gets left out who needs it when you means test. We talked about this the other night. We have to make sure that it's balanced with other social safety net uh, things that people might be reliant on. So we'll see whether or not they actually do this and do it right. You know, Bernie Sanders called for $2,000 a month per person until the end of the emergency, and I think that's the right answer. Um, and it's interesting. Someone, a labor organizer who I follow on Twitter, tweeted today, "We are all learning Marxism 101 today. The economy is careening to a halt because large numbers of workers are at home. It's not the bosses and owners who make value. It's us, the working class. We make the world run." And that is absolutely true, which is why the working class must be taken care of, why we need a healthy social welfare system in this country. Meanwhile, the Fed pumped another $500 billion into the markets today. Which brings the total to $3.2 trillion that they have snapped into existence in the last week or so. Now, anyone who wants to tell me that modern monetary theory is wrong can just eat a fart, as far as I'm concerned, because they just snapped their fingers and created that money. They're not necessarily going to sell treasury bills to offset having done that. I'm not expecting them to add $3 trillion to the national debt. MMT is right. They can create money when they want to. There are restrictions on how you do it, but I feel like the truth of MMT is playing out before our eyes today. Anyway, so people were talking about major party realignment today, the Republicans moving to the left and the Democrats being the corporate party. And I would hold off on that talk for a little while. We have to wait and see what the Republicans actually do. If they set up a UBI and then they use it to gut the social safety network, they take away SNAP and they take away, public housing and veterans benefits and Medicare and Social Security, then it is no political realignment. And now it is time for the Daily Fail. Today's Daily Fail is racist Republicans. Chuck Grassley, quote, "I don't understand why China gets upset because we refer to the virus that originated there as the Chinese virus. Spain never got upset when we referred to the Spanish flu in 1918 and 1919. So basically, Chuck Grassley is saying 100 years ago, it would have been okay. Well, 100 years ago, it would have been okay for you to use the N-word. No, it was never really okay. But 100 years ago, there were a lot of people who thought it was okay and a lot of people who did it. So I don't think the Spanish flu reference, that is a major fail. Kellyanne Conway, one of our racist Republicans in the Daily Fail, quote, you can't make this up. Quote, "I'm married to an Asian," end quote, she said, referring to her husband, George Conway, who is half Filipino. Kellyanne Conway downplayed the White House official reportedly calling coronavirus the Kung flu and Trump using the term Chinese virus. saying that I'm married to an Asian, so it's okay to call it the Kung flu. That's kind of like a I have a black friend argument, I think. What a piece of work that woman is. Uh, later today, later today, she did an about face and said, yes, Kung flu is a racist term. Yes, Kellyanne Conway, we were not going to let you get away with that. But the best one of all, the best racist Republican of the day, is Rand Paul, who gave a self-righteous speech on the floor of the Senate today about let's cut everything else in the federal budget in order to pay for coronavirus relief. Basically, he's calling for a coronavirus sequestration. And he was talking about who receives taxpayer money. He doesn't understand MMT. And he basically was making an argument that undocumented people should not receive taxpayer money. Quote, taxpayer money shouldn't go to non-people. You should have to be a person to get taxpayer money. So he called the undocumented non-people. They are not actual persons, so they don't get anything. He did also call for a complete end to the war in Afghanistan immediately and to stop spending any money there whatsoever, which I agree with. However, I wouldn't bring that up right now while trying to get relief through the fucking Congress. Sometimes some things are more important than getting out of our wars, even though, as you know, that's one of my big issues. Somehow I don't think the millions of people of color that we've slaughtered in our post 9/11 endless wars are the reason why Rand Paul wants to end the wars. I just don't think that's it. On the other hand, Bernie Sanders called for lifting U.S. sanctions against Iran, which already violate international law, because they're stopping medical supply, food, and pharmaceuticals from getting through to the Iranian people, which is the reason there are mass graves in Iran because of this coronavirus, or at least it's one of the reasons. People were very critical of Bernie Sanders when he did not vote for the sanctions against Russia and Iran. And he made it clear at the time that he would vote for sanctions against Russia, but not sanctions against Iran, because they would hurt the Iranian people and they would damage the Iranian nuclear deal, which at that time we had not yet withdrawn from. And he was right. Once again, he had the right judgment at the right time. Bernie also had a very good moment today, which was debated both ways. It was kind of the Rorschach test about Bernie Sanders. What do you think of Bernie Sanders? If you like him, then you thought it was great that he did this. And if you don't like him, then you criticized him for doing this. The ever-truthful Manu Raju from CNN was questioning Bernie. Someone set this to music on Twitter, and it was excellent. I gotta put my hood up because I'm fucking freezing. Oh, I'm sorry. I know that makes me look weird, but so Manu Raju asks him about his time frame for a decision about his campaign, which he's previously been asking about, and Bernie said, we made a statement about that. We're thinking about it. So Manu Raju asked him again, what's the time frame for a decision about the campaign? To which Bernie responded, quote, I'm dealing with a fucking global crisis. We're dealing with a crisis. Right now, I'm trying to do my best to make sure that we don't have an economic meltdown and that people don't die. Is that enough for you to keep me busy for today? Or enough to keep you busy for the day? I think I misquoted it. Um, I like Angry Bernie. What can I say? And Manu Raju's kind of a tool. So, yeah. So, now I did want to move on away from coronavirus for a few minutes. We are going to be talking a lot about Joe Biden over the next couple of months. And I'm not going to pull my punches when I talk about Joe Biden. So last night, Joe Biden gave a speech. Last night, Joe Biden gave a speech. And he said, quote, "Senator Sanders and I may disagree on tactics, but we share a common vision for the need to provide affordable health care to all Americans, reduce income inequity that has risen so drastically, to tackling the existential threat of our time, climate change. Senator Sanders and his supporters have brought a remarkable passion and tenacity to all of these issues. And together they have shifted the fundamental conversation in this country. So let me say, especially to the young voters who have been inspired by Senator Sanders, I hear you. I know what's at stake. I know what we have to do. Our goal as a campaign and my goal as a candidate for president is to unify this party and then unify the nation." Let's just break down how much horse manure is in that speech. Quote, "We share a common vision for the need to provide affordable health care to all Americans." That is blatantly untrue. The Biden healthcare proposal still leaves 10 million Americans uninsured by its own estimate. Bernie's plan, Medicare for All, insures everyone. Providing affordable healthcare to all Americans means everyone has it. So that is not the same vision. Biden's plan continues the current state of healthcare with private insurers who are directly responsible for the fact that we pay twice as much as the average of the other industrial nations. That will not make healthcare affordable. You cannot make healthcare affordable when you have price gouging by the health insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies. And God damn it, I wish I had time to do this article that I read on Sludge about Joe Biden and his pharmaceutical stuff. It's bad. Oh my God. Jesus, maybe I'll get into that at the end of this. Joe Biden said on the debate stage on Sunday night that he believes healthcare is a human right, just like Bernie. A human right he plans on denying to 10 million Americans. That is totally unacceptable. That is not the same vision. Moving on in his speech, quote, "Tackling the existential threat of our time, climate change." The Biden plan calls for a $1.7 trillion investment and carbon neutral by 2050. Scientists have already told us that we need to be off of fossil fuels by 2030. I don't like the way my hood looks. It looks weird. Sorry about that. Bernie's Green New Deal proposal is a $20 trillion investment that takes everything into account, from retrofitting buildings to batteries for nationwide battery systems for electric cars, to high-speed rail, electric rail, to um, solar farms and wind farms. Um, and I think the plan calls for 10 million new jobs to be created. How can that vision be the same as Joe Biden's vision? It just can't. They're not the same thing. Joe Biden won't even end fracking. On Sunday night, he said no new fracking. That means I'm going to let the fracking that's currently happening continue. Fracking is the most dirty way of extracting fossil fuels and releases a ton of methane into the environment. Correct me on that if I'm wrong, but I think it's methane. We need to ban fracking entirely and put those workers to work in clean energy sector. Joe Biden also violated the fossil fuel pledge and took money from fossil fuel interests during the campaign. Not to mention his 3 super PACs, which could be entirely funded by the fossil fuel industry for all we know, because we don't know who's funding those super PACs. Quote, Senator Sanders and his supporters have brought a remarkable passion and tenacity to all of these issues. And now here's where I'm going to get a little bit angry, because we've been told for 5 years that we are all a bunch of irredeemable Bernie bros. We're all young white males, which is not true, who are vicious online, which is also not true. There's another article I love to talk about, debunking that. Ignores the fact that supporters of other candidates have been totally vicious. I'm getting attacked by Biden supporters every day on Twitter now. And there was a time when I was getting attacked by Kamala people, the K-Hive. There was a time when I was getting attacked by Tulsi Gabbard people. There was a time when I was getting attacked by Andrew Yang people, although they were actually the most polite. So we've been vilified for years by the mainstream media and by all of Biden's friends in the Democratic establishment. Now that you need our support, you drop the insults and attacks and mischaracterizations against us, and you want to say, hey, it's all good. We're all friends. Well, I cannot speak for every Bernie supporter that I know, but I do know that I speak for many of us when I say, no, Joe, you are not our friend. Quote, and together they have shifted the fundamental conversation in this country. We have forced the conversation to the left through advocacy, through campaigning, through Bernie Sanders, through Justice Democrats, through our revolution, through the unions. You've called it pie in the sky. You've derided it every step of the way. You've always asked us, how are we going to pay for it? You've always written it off. You say we can get anything done in America because we're Americans, but we can't do Medicare for all, which is an absolute lie. If every major country on earth can do it, America can do it. America has the largest economy in the goddamn world. Of course we can do it. So you don't agree with where we've shifted the conversation to. You want the conversation to be back in the Obama-Clinton neoliberal conversation. Quote, so let me say, especially to the young voters who have been inspired by Senator Sanders, I hear you. I know what's at stake. I know what we have to do. How many times have you told your critics that if they don't agree with you, they should vote for someone else? Joe Biden, you told an immigrant rights activist to vote for Trump. You told people to vote for Bernie all the time. One time you told people to vote for the other Biden, which nobody understands. But you always say, don't vote for me. You don't agree with me? Don't vote for me. And you come at us on Sunday, oh, well, I'm going to undo the bankruptcy bill with Elizabeth Warren's great new bankruptcy legislation, and we're going to do free college up to $125,000 a year. There are a lot of people living in New York, LA, Chicago, San Francisco, other major metropolitan areas, Dallas. They could be making $125,000 a year and not putting a single dime away in savings because of the cost of housing, because of the cost of healthcare, because of the cost of education. Sorry, to pay for the cost of education. So if you're making $124,000 a year, you get a free public college education. But if you make $126,000 a year, you're making too much money. You don't get a free public college education. That doesn't make any sense. There are people making $150K, $200K a year who cannot afford to put their kids through college. Depending on where you live and what the cost of living is. Quote, our goal as a campaign and my goal as a candidate for president is to unify this party and then unify the nation. Look, Joe Biden, if you want to unify the party and the nation, you need to move further left on the issues. Every state that has voted in the primaries has been 57% or higher in favor of Medicare for all. Many of them over 60% in favor of Medicare for all. If Joe Biden came out tomorrow and said, you know what, I changed my mind, we're going to do Medicare for all, I would very seriously have to consider voting for him. There are other reasons why I don't want to vote for Joe Biden. But if he did that, I would take that seriously. I would take that very seriously, and we would hold his feet to the fire once he was elected. But he's offering us none of what we've been fighting for over the last 5 years. So, Joe Biden, I suggest you figure that out and start making some real changes if you want to win the Bernie Sanders voter, or if you want to win all of the Bernie Sanders voters. Many of them are going to vote for you. Many of them are vote blue no matter who. Many of them are going to vote against Donald Trump. Hell, maybe I would if I lived in Ohio, but I don't. I live in California, so I vote how I damn well please. Because you're going to win California. I can guarantee you that. Look, here's my problem with Joe Biden. We know that whether it's Biden or Trump, we will have 4 more years of endless war. We know that whether it's Biden or Trump, we will have 4 more years of US-backed coups like Venezuela and Bolivia. We know that whether it's Biden or Trump, we'll have 4 more years of drone strikes around the world, killing 90% innocent people. We know that whether it's Biden or Trump, we will have an ever-expanding Pentagon budget. Oh yeah, neoliberal Democrats love to expand the Pentagon budget. Look how many of them have voted to expand the budget for Trump, who's supposed to be an existential threat to our country, yet they keep giving him more money for the Pentagon. They keep giving him more money for war. That's not going to change under Joe Biden. We know that whether it's Biden or Trump, we're going to have 4 more years of effectively ignoring climate change, because nothing about Joe Biden's climate plan is workable. It's just not enough. It's just not enough. He doesn't understand the problem. He keeps tweeting that he respects science or some bullshit, and it makes me so angry. If you understood science, if you respected science, you would have a stronger climate proposal. You would have a climate proposal that did not get an F- from the Sunrise Movement. We know that whether it's Biden or Trump, we'll have 4 more years of pro-business legislation, and the working class and middle class will basically be ignored. There will be some crumbs under a Biden administration, but we might be about to get crumbs from the Trump administration. We know that whether it's Biden or Trump, 68,000 Americans will continue to die every year because they don't have health care. We know that whether it's Biden or Trump, the ICE reign of terror will continue and deportations will continue. Biden said Sunday night that he would stop deportations except for criminals. ICE calls being here illegally a crime. So that's an awful lot of leeway for deportations to happen. Biden chooses his words carefully. Or the people who write what he says choose his words carefully for him. We know that whether it's Biden or Trump, we're going to continue to militarize police departments. I haven't heard Biden say a single thing about stopping selling military parts secondhand to police departments. We know that whether it's Biden or Trump, 500,000 Americans are going to go bankrupt for medical bills every year. We know that whether it's Biden or Trump, 45 million Americans will continue to struggle under the yoke of over $1.6 trillion in student loans. Joe Biden is not going to do anything about student loans. Donald Trump is not going to do anything about student loans. We know that whether it's Biden or Trump, there will be no effort to expand the pool of affordable housing in America. We know that 500,000 Americans will remain homeless, and that number will continue to rise, whether it's Biden or Trump. Biden has not mentioned the homeless once in this campaign. They're not a constituency that votes. They're not a constituency that donates, so he doesn't care about them. And we know that whether it's Biden or Trump, Wall Street will pick the cabinet just like they did with Obama. Yes, Citigroup sent Team Obama, a memo suggesting 10 people for different cabinet positions in the Obama administration. 9 of them turned out to be exactly right. How do you like that? And Biden's already told us that he'd like Jamie Dimon as Secretary of Treasury and Mike Bloomberg for the IMF. There's no way you can tell me that that is somehow better than Trump for the economy. And the power of the presidency has changed with the failure to impeach and remove Trump. The president today has more unchecked power than ever before in U.S. history. Joe Biden has delivered for his donors all of his life. How do we know that he won't use the power of the presidency to deliver for his donors? They used the power of the Biden name for his son to get a job on the board at Amtrak, his qualification being he rides the train. And we all know that the only reason Hunter Biden was on the board of Burisma in Ukraine is because his name was Biden. That may be a Republican talking point. It doesn't make it untrue. So how will Joe Biden use the corrupt power that's available to him in the White House? Do you trust how he's going to use that power? This is a high bar that I'm setting, by the way. It's a very high bar. And I would understand, in some ways I understand the fear that the right has of Bernie Sanders, because the presidency is so powerful now. And there are a lot of things that he could do, like legalizing marijuana on day one. So, Joe Biden, you are going to get the votes of most Bernie Sanders supporters. Most of them are going to vote for you to vote against Donald Trump. Twice as many Hillary Clinton supporters voted for McCain instead of Obama in 2008 as Bernie Sanders supporters who voted for Trump in 2016, meaning the Bernie Sanders voter was a more faithful Democratic Party voter than Hillary Clinton voters were in 2008. So yeah, you're going to get a lot of their votes. I know you're not Joe Biden, but thank you for playing the part of Joe Biden. But you don't have my vote, not yet. Pretty hard road to get it. But again, it doesn't matter because I'm a superfluous voter, as the political scientists say. And as a superfluous voter in the state of California, my vote doesn't count. Ta-da! Thank you guys for sticking out, hanging out with me for such a long stream. My back hurts. I'm going to go lie on a heating pad. Continue to stay safe. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Make sure you do everything possible to take care of the older people in your life. Remember, everything we do to take care of ourselves is solidarity for taking care of everyone else. Progress is going to happen in this country. I don't know what road is going to get us to progress, but I know we're on the road now. And I've wanted these things all my life from my government. I've believed in these things all my life. In particular, protecting the environment, socialized medicine, as we used to call it, and free college. So those things are going to happen. It's a question of when. It's a question of critical mass. It's a question of the electorate, the people who are 45 and under who support that agenda, of that electorate continuing to grow year by year. And 4 years from now, there will be 4 more years of people who are more likely progressive than not. So it's going to require you, and it's going to require me. So keep the faith, keep the solidarity. Or is it this hand? I don't know. Anyway, thanks a lot. I'll see you tomorrow night.